Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Paulina Pinsky is a writer and educator based in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. She received her MFA in Nonfiction Creative Writing from Columbia University, where she has been teaching comedy writing to high schoolers since 2017. She received her BA in American Studies with a concentration in media and popular culture from Barnard College, where she wrote her undergraduate thesis on Joan Rivers. Not only did she study comedy from an academic standpoint, but she went on to pursue the Second City Conservatory in 2016, where she studied improvisational and sketch comedy. She is the co-author of It Doesn't Have to Be Awkward, and most notably in October 2021, she was a finalist for Longridge Review's Barnhill Prize for her essay, Other Mother. Additionally, she was a 2021 MacDowell Fellow and has been published in Narratively, Human Parts, Columbia Journal, Slackjaw Humor, and HuffPo Women, amongst others. And she is currently working on her memoir. So do join me in today's conversation with Paulina. She's great fun, had a wonderful, varied history despite her young age. Not only has she been a stand-up comedian, not only does she teach comedy, but she's also been a figure skater, which is something I am in awe of and wish that I could have done at some stage in my life. So do join me today in our conversation and find out how Paulina got to where she is and what she's aiming for in the future. And if you are a fan of Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, this is a definite listen for you. Well, Paulina, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
It is an honor and a privilege to be here. I'm very excited.
I wonder, I always start with this question. I wonder if you could share with us your own journey to writing and how you got to where you are today.
So as a young girl, I was a competitive figure skater. And so I had no idea that I was going to grow up to be a writer. However, I always journaled, and I have this one specific journal from 3rd grade to maybe 7th grade. And it was like this blue fluffy journal with like a faux lock on it. And every day I would catalog who I had a crush on and in what order. So it was like 1 through 4, 1, Jack, 2, Kevin, 3, Creighton. Next day it was like, Jack's terrible. Creighton's my number one love. So it all kind of started in a journaling fashion. But it wasn't until I got to college when I wrote my first piece. It was called Get Your Teeth Checked, and it was published in the Columbia University Spectator. And it was really well received within my community. It was about intergenerational body trauma. It was about my bulimia recovery. It was about my relationship to my mother. However, 6 months later, it got picked up by the New York Post, and I went viral for a week because of who my father is. And so I learned that because of my proximity to his platform, I was going to be kind of scrutinized in a way that my peers weren't going to be. And so from that point forward, I was like, you know what? I don't want to be eating disorder girl anymore. I'm going to pursue comedy. And so I moved to Chicago to do Second City after I graduated from college. And I did the conservatory there, where I studied sketch and improv comedy. However, I felt like it wasn't enough. And I was, looking for more of a sort of intensive writing experience. So that's when I applied for MFA programs. and I had the good fortune of being accepted into Columbia University's Nonfiction Creative Writing program. And so my trajectory has been a little bit non-traditional, but I think, you know, it all started from a love of just sitting with myself and just pouring out my thoughts. And, you know, I'm such an advocate of journaling. I really think it's the root of like a healthy relationship with yourself, and also like obviously a relationship to writing. And so journaling is at the foundation of my writing practice, and that's where it all started. However, the trajectory started in a weird kind of way. But I'm a writer.
Yeah, no, it has. It's not weird, but it's been, you've gone from, you know, journaling to kind of stand up and sketch and improv to then to nonfiction. So quite a diverse range of writing styles and techniques that you've mastered over the years. Really interesting background. But I can't not ask you about your undergraduate thesis on Joan Rivers, which just sounds like so much fun. But what did attract you to her, and what was the nature of the thesis?
So junior year of college, I did a second city college program called Comedy Studies the summer going into my senior year. And that's like when I was like, I'm going to be a comedian, which... I don't know. Comedian is such a like loaded term, because then people expect you to be funny all the time. And I just like, now I don't want to be funny all the time. But anyways, I digress. And so fall of my senior year, I knew I wanted to write about comedians. I studied American Studies in undergraduate, which is like an interdisciplinary genre of sorts. And Joan Rivers actually died the day I picked my thesis. And my thesis advisor was like, I know you want to write about female comedians. Like, why don't you just focus on Joan Rivers? And I had actually met Joan Rivers the year before.
Wow.
I was in like the theater district of New York City with my friends, and we were leaving a play, and we like walked past this lobby, and my friend was like, oh my God, that's Joan Rivers. And I was like, oh, my dad knows her. And he was like, you got to go in. You have to go introduce yourself. I was like, I really don't like doing that. He was like, this is Joan Rivers. Like, you need to go. And so I walked in, and so I was like, hi, my name is Paulina Pinsky. My father is Dr. Drew. He's a friend of yours. I go to Barnard College. She goes, oh, honey, I don't care who your father is. You should lead with the Barnard stuff, because that's much more important. Because she went to Barnard as well.
Right.
And I was telling her how I wanted to go into comedy, and she's like, yes, we need more women in comedy. Like, you need to do it. And then she passed away soon after. And so it just felt very serendipitous that she became my focus. And so my thesis was a feminist disabilities lens on Joan Rivers' comedy, plastic surgery, and red carpet culture. And so within this thesis, I came up with the spectacle of defacement, in that in her comedy, she would verbally deface herself by saying that she was ugly, unmarriageable, all these things. Then in her plastic surgery, she physically used the knife on herself in order to achieve a feminine ideal. And then on the red carpet, she wielded the knife that she once wielded at herself at others. And so it was like the cycle of defacement through verbal, physical, and, you know, interpersonal interaction.
Yeah, it was so interesting. And I guess she's not alone in that either. There'll be many other, maybe, do you think that's a generational thing, perhaps?
Well, Joan Rivers was really one of the first female stand-up comedians. Like, before her, it was like Phyllis Dillard, who really like she dressed up like a clown. She would wear like crazy, you know, feather headpieces and, you know, pointed red boots and big fluffy boas and all those things in order to sort of remove the sort of the spectacle of being a woman. And it's interesting, because when I was in comedy studies and doing comedy all the time, and like, this may come off the wrong way, but like, people would be like, oh, you're too pretty to do comedy. And I'd be like, no, I want to be funny. Like, I don't care what I look like. Like, that shouldn't even be a factor. And I think for so many women, either you have to physically you know, or at least at the time, you had to physically sort of deform yourself, or you had to verbally tear yourself down. Because Joan went on, you know, late night and would wear, you know, a black A-line dress with a pair of pearls and her hair up nice. So she looked beautiful, but this sort of, I mean, she was, you know, the last girl in Larchmont, you know, that's sort of like her thing. And I think that she sort of created a lineage after her, whether or not people recognize her for that, because she became such a spectacle and she became so inflammatory. But that's because, you know, she was like the first stand-up comedian to talk about abortions, you know, and that was like totally a no-no in the 50s. And so it was amazing to kind of study the trajectory of her career, because she was transgressive for each stage of her career, right? And because in the 50s, like, you know, talking about not being marriage material and abortions is transgressive in the 1950s, you know, 2015, she's going to talk about, you know, Heidi Klum being as hot as the Auschwitz ovens, you know, like that's the same sort of like, it's the same intent, but it's intensified for the era in which it exists.
Oh, gosh, fascinating. So much more to her than just being on chat shows and just being outspoken and being a mouth. Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, interesting and fun as well. I would imagine as well to study her.
It was.
So on your website, you talk about the fact that you go through hypomanic periods and then also periods of depression. And it's very, you know, open of you to kind of share that with us on your public forum there. But I was interested because I wondered, does that impact your writing life generally? And as well, does it have an impact on the writing that you do as well?
Definitely. I love this question. I haven't spoken about it publicly in as much as I would like to, mostly because I think the more we talk about these things, the more destigmatized they become. So in 2018, I experienced my first hypomanic episode. I've yet to have another one. Part of it was I was on too high of an antidepressant, and that sparked the hypomanic episode, plus filming a millennial talk show pilot with my dad, which is its own chaotic, like anyone would have a hypomanic episode after that, I think. And so what I appreciate about that period is I discovered that I paint. And so when I'm more manic, I kind of move out of verbal expression and move more into sort of abstract theoretical shapes. And I kind of do these sort of floral, kind of like Hawaii inspired flowers everywhere. And so 2018 was a big painting year for me. I just like painted everything. But I think through that, I learned that the creative impulse always remains. It's just a matter of how it's expressed. And I definitely go through sort of seasons of writing where it's like over the pandemic, I was writing, like I was in it, you know, and part of that was like, I had the time and space and privilege of an apartment and food and all those things. But it's cyclical. However, I do really believe in routinizing the creative process because of that sort of cyclical nature. It's like, okay, well, I may not write an essay today, but I have to do my morning pages. Like morning pages have to happen. That happens every day. And so I've sort of created writing structures so that even when I'm not quote unquote writing, I'm always writing. But I definitely, you know, it's interesting because I feel like the cyclical nature of sort of the way my body works has at first was sort of, like, I remember I like wrote this thing and I like sent it to my agent and it was like not cogent at all. And she was just like, I can't do anything with this. And that moment really shook me where I was like, oh, my agent can tell me that this is not good. And I was like, okay, I need to be a little bit more purposeful about when I like send things to people. But the cycles kind of help me kind of let writing breathe. Like, I really believe of like letting things sit for a period of time and then coming back to them. So yeah, that's a very interesting question. I like that question.
And so the kind of opposite then of that hypomanic period is that period of depression. Did you find that you were less creative in that time, that the impulse left you, or that maybe the paintings that you were doing changed? Or did you write during that period?
I think I do more painting when I'm depressed too. I do more painting. I think writing and painting have sort of kind of been my two modes of expression. I mean, I also I grew up as a competitive figure skater, so like dance is also something for me, but I like haven't quite integrated that into the cycle yet, which I'm hoping to do. But I guess like when I'm depressed, you know, I'll like open a Google Doc and like usually a couple sentences will come out, and then 6 months later I'll find it and I'll be like, ooh, that was dark. Oh, I felt that way once. I really just like, I think my main thing is like documenting everything so that my future self can come back and be like, oh, that's what that felt like, or oh, that's what that looked like. And so I guess it matters less to me what the output is. It's just a matter of there being output at all. And then if I'm really, really depressed, I just lay in bed. Then there's no hope.
Fair enough. Quite frankly, fair enough. Now, I know that Julia Cameron's The Artist Way sort of came along at a pivotal moment for you, and you've described it as changing your life. So could you tell us about that experience? In what way did it change your life?
Absolutely. So 2018, after the manic episode, I was gifted The Artist Way, and which is probably the best way to receive The Artist Way. And I started the workbook by myself, and I mean, first of all, I love a workbook. I love being told what to do with structure. But more than anything, I loved sort of the concept of just like, everyone is an artist. Point blank. Everyone is an artist and everyone has creative potential. And it's just about kind of thinking of your life as your medium. And that really helped me kind of identify the way I wanted to live. And too, like, so The Artist Way is a 12-week spiritual workbook. And there's, 12 chapters. And at the end of each chapter, there's assignments and tasks that are like, if you have mending that needs to be done, mend it. Or if you have a pot that's overgrown, please repot your plant, So it's all very like simple, kind of tangible tasks. And then there's also the tasks that are like, write your hall of monsters, like who have hindered you in your artistic process throughout your life. And so you like list like your third grade teacher, your mom, your aunt, whatever. Yeah. And then like the next week it'll be like, write a letter to your monster, and then there's a lot of tasks in there that are actually really conducive to unblocking creativity, which is the point of the book. But the sort of requirement of the book is 3 pages of stream of consciousness every morning, which is morning pages, and then an artist date once a week. So that can be like literally stepping into a church and looking at the stained glass windows, or going to a movie by yourself, or going on a walk. It's really, or going to a concert or a museum. It's player determined, which I love.
Yeah, I think that the idea of the artist's dates, I think is just the best one, and bizarrely in some ways I find it the hardest one. Just before I know it, a whole week is gone and I haven't done anything that is out with family, work, the home, whatever it is, especially in the last 18 months or so. But it's so, what Joanna Penn calls, refilling the creative well. It's so important to get these outside influences that can then spark something in us, or just refresh us in some way, and maybe give us a new perspective on something and take us forward in some way. It's for me, that was the biggest takeaway from the Artist Way. Yeah. Have you done it? Yes. And again, like you, I was gifted it by a cousin who had done it. He's an actor and an intense journaler. And so he said it was really helpful to him, and he gifted it to me. So yeah, it's had a special place in my heart too. But you've taken it one step further, because you now host the Writers, what's it called, the Artist's Way group. So tell us about that as well. That sounds like good fun.
So this January, I'm going to be leading a group of people through the Artist's Way. It's going to be 12 weeks. And the reason I'm doing this is because June 2020, I decided I was going to lead a group through the Artist's Way. And I recruited all my friends. I was like, we're doing this summer. And the kind of intense reality of it was like, the protest started, the Black Lives Matters protest started like literally the day we started Artist's Way. And so we had America had a very tumultuous, I mean, the world had a tumultuous summer, but like America had a very tumultuous summer. And it was like kind of like, it both felt stabilizing and weird to like make time for ourselves and kind of cultivate ourselves during that chaotic time. But I also felt like that's all we could do, really, is like really look at ourselves clearly and kind of reacquaint ourselves with ourselves so that we can be better people. So the first 12-week one was June 2020. It went really, really well. And so the main reason I'm leading this group is because I need the structure. I need the Artist's Way back in my life. But yeah, we're going to be meeting on Monday nights, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm potentially going to have multiple groups meeting, so it might be more than that, depending on who signs up. But really,
and are you doing this online?
Yes, it's going to be through Zoom.
And so anyone can sign up?
Anyone, anywhere in the world can sign up.
Cool.
If we get a Scottish consortium, I'll do it on your time.
So that starts in January, and people can sign up for that on your website.
Special guest, Georgina. Yes, you can sign up on my website under the Artist's Way tab.
Okay, I'll link to that in the show notes for sure.
Thank you.
So you find it very helpful then just to have this kind of structure in place for not just the morning pages, but do you find that, are you able to apply your painting to this as well, or is it solely focused on your writing?
I think this time around it's going to be focused on my writing. But at previous times, I think the Artist's Way sort of opened the door to painting. And that's what I love about the Artist's Way is like literally one of the tasks will be like, list 5 things you want it to be when you grow up, and then circle 1 and like, that's what you're going to be, and it's like, painter was one of the ones I put down and I was like, wait, that's how I feel? Like, what? It's like you kind of surprise yourself with whatever your first impulse is. And so this will be my 4th time going through the Artist's Way. And this time around, so I've been working on a memoir for like 5 years now. And my intention through doing the Artist's Way is sort of to create structure and accountability for myself so that I continue to do my own writing.
That's so important.
Yeah.
And I do want to come on and talk about your memoir in just a moment, but I wanted to ask you first of all about the book that came out this year. You've published It Doesn't Have to Be Awkward, Dealing with Relationships, Consent, and Other Hard to Talk About Stuff. And so what was the drive behind this book?
So fall of 2019, it was the height of the Me Too movement, and my dad was approached about a consent book. And he of course thought that the topic was important, but he was like, listen, I'm old. We need a young person. My daughter's a writer. We should pull her in. And so basically what happened, I was selling t-shirts at his podcasting event because my mom made me. Family business.
Sorry, Paulina, just for those of us outside of the States, your father, is he well known in America?
Yes. So my dad is Dr. Drew Pinsky. He is a internist, a dictionologist, and television personality. Okay. So he's done he started by doing late night radio in Los Angeles on Loveline. So he would give out medically based sex advice, right, from like the 80s to 2016. And then from there he did like he did news. He was on like CNN sister channel, HLN, for a couple of years, 5 years or so, Celebrity Rehab on VH1. And now he's everywhere.
Okay.
He's sort of like, this is how I would describe it. People don't recognize his name, but when you see his face, you've seen him on the TV so many times that you know him.
Okay.
So that's kind of, he's in the ether.
Okay.
And so my dad does a lot of podcasting. So much so that they renovated our childhood playroom into a podcast studio in the house.
Oh, lucky for some. How nice.
Yeah, it's a good gig. And so he came up and he was like, we sold the consent book today. And I was like, what consent book? And he was like, we talked about it. I was like, no, we didn't. So I was thrown into it. However, I had just graduated from the MFA, not even 6 months before. I was like, okay, this is a writing opportunity. Like, most people don't get a book deal landed in their lap like 6 months after graduating from an MFA. And so, the book itself is about consent, yes, but it takes consent out of a legal standpoint, and it takes it out of also a sexual context too, mostly because we wanted kids to have practice with consent before getting into sexual interactions. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually a lot more based on identity, and so we get into like gender and sexuality and like relationships with friends, relationships with parents, relationships with teachers. We don't even get to crushes until chapter 13.
Okay.
And so it's really about like the first 6 chapters. So it's meant to be read the first 6 chapters like straight through, and then you can kind of bop around for the rest of them. But we really wanted kids to think about their identity in relationship to others, because if you can trust yourself, have compassion for yourself, and know your own boundaries, then you can trust someone else, have compassion for them, and respect their boundaries. Mm-hmm. The sort of central tenet of the book is TCB, trust, compassion, boundaries, mm-hmm. which is the origin of that comes from my obsession with Elvis Presley. And he had a pack of friends, like his sort of what's his friends, his Memphis Mafia friends. That's what they called them. Okay. And they all necklaces, which stood for taking care of business. And when I was in the 3rd grade, I became obsessed with Elvis, and I was like, I need one of these necklaces, Mom. And I proceeded to wear it for the next 10 years. I pray to Elvis before anything important. And so TCB seemed like an easy acronym to take and repurpose. And so, and it's interesting because throughout the book, we have sort of fictional scenarios that help you apply TCB. So it'll be like, Georgia and Jim have been friends since the 3rd grade. Georgia has feelings for Jim. Like, what does Georgia do? Mm-hmm. it kind of gives both children and adults sort of practical situations to apply TCB.
Yeah. And is this for both young boys and girls, or is it mainly for girls? For both?
No, yeah. 12 to 20-year-olds, big demographic.
Yeah. So a really interesting read for parents as well, to kind of get a younger perspective and kind of know what's going on in, kids these days, that some things will be the same, some things will be different, I imagine. So I think I might be digging that out, because
I'll send it to you. I have a
daughter who's coming up with tweens, so these will be things she's facing very soon.
We definitely, the one that's sort of like been sort of the hot button everyone's been asking about, we really get into gender and pronouns and all that stuff. So I really recommend the book for people who are struggling with understanding like that about gender and what that even means, and what are pronouns and how do you use them. And so this is a very practical advice guide to that.
Fantastic. So as you say, you wrote it with your father, and I'm interested in the kind of practicalities of co-writing a book. So for example, did one of you write the first draft of a chapter and then the other revise it, or did you both work on it together in the same office?
So the sort of thing that I'm not supposed to reveal, but I'm going to reveal because I think it's stupid not to reveal. We had a quote unquote ghostwriter, but she wasn't a ghostwriter. She like ended up sort of being like a project manager for us.
Right.
And so we would work in a Google Doc where she would like ask a question, and then my dad would type out all his stuff. And then I would respond to all his stuff because he's sort of considered the expert in the field. And so the book is really a conversation between the two of us. And you can feel that both in the text and in the audiobook, in that we alternate, right? There's two different fonts in the book. There's my dad's font and my font. And it really feels like a conversation. And mostly like it feels like a conversation because it was a conversation. And so I think because we had that third person who was helping us sort of cohese it all together, and kind of direct it, it became a much better book than had I, 6 months out of my MFA program, like tried to direct my father through writing a book. Yeah. Because even though I have an MFA, they do not teach you how to write a book. Like they don't.
I've heard that so many times, actually. Yeah, you can deep dive, you can deep read, you can pull apart a sentence, you learn how to do all these things, but actually constructing a big piece of work isn't one of the things that's taught, nor kind of the business side of actually being a writer as well. But I think that's really interesting point that you've made about having, you've called them a ghostwriter, but it feels that perhaps they've also been a bit of a kind of a book coach in this respect, helping the shape, helping the direction, making sure that everybody's voice is heard, and discussing with you, what would we need to include, what do we not include, and when do we put the chapters when, and what the reading experience will be like for the reader as well.
Absolutely. And it's, it's interesting because through having that experience with her, I learned how to do it. And so now, like in my writing coaching business, like I'm able to sort of offer those same services to people because I watched her do it. And so like, I have to say the best part of that book was her being a part of the team, because I learned so much.
Yeah, it kind of in the weeds. So you now also you're kind of paying it forward, if you like, and you're helping writers who are looking to write their first. You work with novelists or nonfiction writers. Tell us about your business.
So a lot of people who come to me mainly want to write memoir, though I have people who come for college application essays, essay contests, college essays. I have a couple of teen girls who I give them writing prompts and they write, nature scenes. I pretty much, I'm the full spectrum of whatever you want to do. But the main thing that I do is memoir. And it's been really amazing after publishing this book, because I've been doing more podcasts and all that. And like so many people are reaching out and it's very exciting. And I feel very lucky that I get to do the work that I do, because it's so rewarding. And I really do believe that everyone has a story to tell. And it's an honor and a privilege to help facilitate those stories.
It really is. Yeah. People are letting us into their kind of inner sanctum and sharing very vulnerable things with us. As you say, it really is an honor and a privilege to help them bring that out to the world. You mentioned memoir there, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier. You're currently writing your own memoir.
Yes.
What is how's it going, and what's the kind of scope of the memoir? What's the main subject?
So the memoir, it's interesting because when I first got to graduate school, everybody was like, do you know what you're writing? Do you have a project? And I was like, I have no idea. I don't even know how I got in. Like, I'm just thankful to be here. And unbeknownst to me, I started writing that memoir, the minute that I said I didn't know what I was doing. But I'm thinking that this memoir's scope is going to be about sort of the sort of idea of celebrity in my family and sort of my proximity to media culture and sort of, my experience of celebrity culture from the inside, kind of. And so I'm thinking about it in 3 parts and sort of like 3 sort of like released, because I end up writing these like 60 to 70 page essays. And I'm like, no one's going to take this. Like, this is only going to be in a book. And so I'm kind of zooming in on these sort of experiences, like the first one. So when the essay "Get Your Teeth Checked" was picked up by the New York Post and went national, and do you know what The View is?
No.
Okay, so The View is this like daytime show in it's filmed in New York, and it's like got Whoopi Goldberg and what's her name, Barbara Walters, and like just any sort of like adjacent celebrity woman, she is like on that show. And so I was interviewed on The View about my eating disorder, and it was like this 7-minute segment, and Barbara Walters like not even looking at the teleprompter, and she's like, "What did your mother say to you when you told her you were bulimic?" And like I had been through like a week of interviews on like CNN, HLN, Entertainment Tonight, Extra, just like every sort of like celebrity tabloid like I had been on. And I'm a junior in college, and I'm just like, this is the first essay I've ever written.
Okay, and, baptism by fire. Wow.
Oh, absolutely. And so the first kind of section would be sort of honing in on that experience of like being sensationalized and understanding my proximity to the platform, and understanding that like, I am under a microscope in a way that other people aren't. But also I'm not at the same time, like people don't care. So it's like that kind of weird balance. And then the second portion is about filming a millennial talk show pilot with my dad with 20 millennial influencers, which was its own kind of insane, like reality television is disgusting. And that's my final stance. And then the third part I'm thinking is going to be like about this consent book experience and like what that's been like, and, becoming a writer and what that's means. And so that's sort of what I'm thinking the scope of the memoir is going to be, especially since I'm so young. Like, I'm not trying to be like, do the sort of like monolithic, like I was born in Pasadena, California, like
I want 3 years to wait for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an amazing project to be considering and mulling over, and there's such a lot of scope there. There's maybe even 3 memoirs there on those different subjects. Yeah,
it might be.
Wow. Well, I wish you luck with it, and I'll look forward to kind of keeping an eye out for it for when it does come to fruition and you finally release it into the world. But until that point, do tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and your writing and the help that you give to writers.
Absolutely. I am MIZPiggy111 on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, all that. You can find me there. And then my personal website is paulinapinsky.com. So you can always contact me through there. I am always looking for people to work with, talk to, all that jazz. I feel exceptionally lucky that I get to do what I do. So thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
A pleasure, an absolute pleasure. And I'll be sure to link to all of that in the show notes. Well, Paulina Pinsky, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Before you go, here's a word from my friend Stephen Schneider over at Discovered Wordsmiths podcast.
Hey, this is Stephen Schneider, and I know that doesn't matter because you have no idea who I am. Well, I run a podcast called Discovered Wordsmiths. This is a great podcast where we talk with brand new authors, people you've not heard of, but probably should because they have some really great books and a lot of great information that they've learned as new authors. So if you're interested, run out right now. In fact, go. It's going to disappear. You got to do it quick. Just whatever you're listening to this on, use that, look us up. That'd probably be easier. So anyway, it's Discovered Wordsmiths. Check us out.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.